Good.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll learn something on the law enforcement, public safety side today.
Yes, I hope so. Yeah.
All right, y'all, we'll get started here. So I'm gonna mute everybody. You can unmute yourself at some point. If you have a question, I recommend, at least till the end, just, talk in the chat box. It's not really gonna disrupt us. We're pretty good at, seeing it and reading it and talking. So just go ahead and do that. I'm gonna share my screen. All right. Everybody see my screen? Give me a thumbs up. Got it. Cool.
Got it.
All right. De-escalating dementia. So quick note on the name. I was posting all about this on LinkedIn, and as Tim is well aware, we had one woman who got really frustrated at us for having it be called de-escalating because she felt like we were being inconsiderate to people living with dementia. And of course, it's very hard to explain anything to anybody on the internet, when they're mad. But of course, that's not the intention, because as Tim points out, de-escalating is a word that is commonly used in public safety, and a word that, is known to be associated with police. So, Tim, any notes on that?
No, it's just, the main thing is a lot of people don't correlate Alzheimer's, dementia, or dementia in general with public safety, law enforcement. But usually when we get involved, it is at a point where it is a crisis situation. And when we come in, we need to have the tools on our tool belt to be able to de-escalate, calm things down, and help do our best to resolve the problem, because things can turn bad very quickly depending on how you approach the subject and approach dementia. And that's where we're going to touch on some things today as to why it's important to know how to de-escalate or understand where that person is in their mind.
Right. Exactly. So we'll hop into this. Tim, you want to introduce yourself? Here's a nice picture of him right here.
Sure. I'm Tim Sutton in Virginia, outside of Richmond. I went to James Madison University, graduated with a business degree. Started working on an MBA, got tired of school. So a friend of mine had applied with the police department, told me I should take a test, and I thought I could use a paycheck. So I went and applied for a department, started working as a police officer. After 4 years, I switched departments, started to work for a different department in the Richmond area. And I've been doing law enforcement for 31 years. The way I got into this is our agency got involved in Project Lifesaver, which is a tracking system to use with people with cognitive issues who tend to wander off. I learned how to do the tracking and how the equipment worked, went out and started meeting families. And that's kind of a lot of the education I got, was interacting with the families, interacting with the caregivers, care partners, if you want to call them, and trying to educate myself as best as possible. And I started to realize that we in law enforcement, public safety as a whole, we're responding on a lot of calls for service. It's not just a wandering issue or an elopement issue. We were dealing with domestics and other types of situations, and we did not understand Alzheimer's, dementia, any of that stuff. So I took it upon myself to educate myself as much as possible, to get out there and help train so we can advocate and help the care partners. Started my consulting business in 2011. Traveled around the country training law enforcement, and continue to oversee our Project Lifesaver program here for my agency. And we've actually got 130 people in our Project Lifesaver program at this present time. That sums it up.
Nice. That's me. I have a master's in gerontology, which is the study of aging. And Tim and I actually met on, some of you were probably there, on a webinar like 2 months ago, I guess. And we got into a great conversation about how often the police are involved in making sure people living with dementia do get home safely, and realized, okay, I feel like I've been thinking about that for a while, but really deciding, okay, you know what, like it's time for me to put a webinar together with Tim's help on this. I have 2 books published with Johns Hopkins University Press, this is my second book. My publisher has told me I have over 900 pre-orders
Nice.
on it. Yeah, and it's on Amazon now. I love dementia care and educating others on dementia. I've worked with thousands of people living with dementia and their caregivers. I have a weekly email that goes out every Monday. So if you don't get that already, I recommend going to my website, rachelwonderlin.com, and signing up for that. I think this is super important. And actually, like 2 weeks ago, I didn't even tell you this, Tim, my mom and my whole family is like pretty well educated in dementia because of me. Like, how could they not be at this point? So my mom and my sister are sitting in my parents' porch in New Jersey, and my mom sees out the window this older woman walking down the street. It's like 95 degrees Fahrenheit outside. This woman is bundled up in a coat and like full, like pants, but she doesn't have any shoes on. And she's kind of walking around and she's picking up my neighbor's trash cans and like walking with them, putting them down. And my mom said to herself, you know, and to my sister, something's obviously wrong here. And Rachel would be mad at me if I didn't go check on this lady. So she went over across the street and approached her and said, hi, you know, I'm Pam. What's your name? And the woman told her, and they sat. And my sister ran back to the house and got her some water. And, you know, they ended up they called the police because they were like, well, we don't know where this lady lives and she doesn't know where she lives. She had walked barefoot, bundled up, probably, you know, a solid 15-minute walk down the road from where she lived. And the police, you know, came and they were like, oh yeah, we know her. We've picked her up before and went and dropped her off back at her house. And I was like, this sucks that there's like nothing else we can do. And I wanted my mom to call Adult Protective Services because I was like, clearly, like if she lives with her husband, like he's like taking a nap or something. This lady's just like leaving the house. So I think it's really important to make sure that the people who are typically called, aka the police, for situations like this understand dementia. Clearly, it's a very important topic, and you know. The officer was super nice, and he was like, yeah, we get dementia calls a couple times a week. Like just people being lost or people needing to go home, you know. So we're going to go through some quick basics because I think it's always important what dementia actually means. So dementia is a term that actually encompasses more than 100 different diseases. So it's actually just a list of symptoms. Believe it or not. Confusion, trouble understanding logic or time, the inability to care for oneself physically, the inability to make safe choices. That's a really big one here. And Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia. So you often hear people ask me all the time, what's the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? Alzheimer's is the most common cause of dementia. Typically, people will use them almost interchangeably. I just like to say dementia because I think it makes it less confusing, and not everybody with dementia has an Alzheimer's diagnosis. So other common causes include Parkinson's disease dementia, Lewy body dementia, vascular dementia, traumatic brain injury, PTSD, long-standing mental illnesses. We're seeing more and more of this leading to cognitive impairments. And I have in red here frontotemporal dementia. In care community settings, FTD or frontotemporal dementias are typically referred to as like a red flag diagnosis because people with FTD will sometimes have more behavioral related challenges. So their frontal lobe controls your filter, your planning, and your executive functioning. It's also the thing that tells you not to say or do that thing that you thought of. People living with FTD sometimes have that piece of their brain that doesn't work really well. So they'll say or do inappropriate things. They also tend to be a lot younger, so they don't fit into care community settings as well. And in this specific scenario, there's a really good chance if you're like de-escalating a situation that the person living with dementia could be undergoing some sort of delirium, some sort of extra confusion, or could have a diagnosis like FTD. So I think it's really important for people to have a general understanding of what dementia is before entering into the world of communicating with someone living with dementia. So quick, more basics. Dementia, a loss of mental and physical functioning that affects thinking, remembering, reasoning, aka everyday living. As I always like to say, it's not losing your keys, it's not knowing what your keys are for. So I've typically very often encountered people who will come up to me after a talk. Well, no one's coming up to me now because I haven't actually been out in front of people talking for a long time, but people will come up and say, you know, as you were talking, now I'm really worried about myself because, you know, yesterday I went into the kitchen and I forgot why I was in the kitchen. So do I have dementia? No, we all do that. It's looking at your keys and going, I don't know what these are for. How will you know if someone has dementia? I like to tell people to keep an eye out for like that one weird thing that makes you think twice. Usually you'll notice someone has a behavior or is doing something that is off character for them or is strange in some way. And that makes you think, that was odd. Typically, I think honestly, like everybody I've ever talked to, every family has a moment where they were like, that was weird. What is delirium?
Can I throw something in, just what you brought up 2 weeks ago? You know, there are no telltale signs to just look at somebody and tell that they've got dementia. And I also teach autism, and I say, you know, you can't tell the difference with somebody with Down syndrome. You can look at somebody with Down syndrome and pick up on that something's different. But like Rachael was explaining with her mom, seeing the lady walking down the road in the summertime with the big coat on, because I can tell you many times when we deal with the wandering and we're out searching for people, they will not dress for the elements. So it's being able to pick up on, why are they wearing that? Why do they not have shoes on? If it's 10 degrees outside and they wander off, they won't have shoes. They'll probably have their nightgown on and just be wandering off. So it's picking up on a lot of the visual, very subtle visual cues to alert you that something's going on.
Right. Exactly. And that was what alerted my mom. And she even said later, you know, she was like, if I hadn't learned everything from you, I probably wouldn't have gone out there and approached that woman. She was like, I would have just assumed like, she's crazy, whatever, you know. And I think that's what everybody, you kind of are trained to do. And my sister said that she had a moment where she was like, I was afraid. And I said, why? She's like, well, I don't know. Like, I don't know what she's going to do. I was like, that lady's not going to do anything, you know, and she got over it quickly. But, you know, you can kind of see like this automatic thing, like you see someone acting strangely and you kind of, you get nervous. You go like, I don't know what this means. Like, should I be afraid? And obviously the answer is pretty much no. This leads into this next little thing. What is delirium? Delirium is a sudden onset of confusion. And as I said about this lady, I said, you know, she probably is undergoing some delirium. She probably has a urinary tract infection, which can lead to some serious delirium. If you go to the hospital and you get put under for a procedure, a lot of times people coming out of that have some ongoing delirium for a little bit. They're a little more agitated, a little more confused. And the people who are, you know, we find wandering, we find like outside, missing from their house, a lot of times there is another thing going on there, not only just the dementia, but then also maybe another medical condition happening, some acute issue that's going on that's causing them to leave the house and go, you know, where did I come from? This one's for you, Tim.
Yeah, you look at some of these areas where people do wander off, swamps and different things, and somebody who's not dealing with cognitive issues, neurotypical individual is going to look at that and go, you know, would anybody in their right mind walk right into that? Well, with dementia, they're really not in their right mind. There's something going on that would lead them. And many times people with dementia are, when they wander, they will walk into water. Some of them are drawn to water, and they will walk where we've found numerous people waist deep in swamps. They don't know how they got there, why they were there, but that's just where they headed to. So it's imperative when you do have the wanderers, if there are water sources in the area, public safety needs to know, get to those locations as quickly as possible and clear those locations and make sure that they are not there, and then focus your resources elsewhere. But we've got to protect them and get the information out to get the water. I don't care if it's a pool in a backyard or what it is, but get to those water sources and make sure that they're not in there.
That's really interesting. I did not know that.
Yes.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I know big bodies of water, they sometimes will gravitate towards that. And sometimes we've noticed that with streams and creeks and things, once they get to a water source such as that, many times they will turn and follow the direction of that. So we send people to whatever bridges or road overpasses might be at the water, over top of the water sources, because we hope that at some point they will come out in one of those areas. I know Virginia Department of Emergency Management has done a lot of research over the years on dementia and lost persons. And that's one thing that they have typically noticed, is that these water sources sometimes redirect and send them in a different direction. So you kind of have to, when you've got somebody who took off, it's average person can walk 4 miles an hour. You don't know if they're going north, south, east, or west. So that search area can grow exponentially in a very quick time. So that's why it is an emergency. And I would encourage you to stress to your caregivers, don't worry about bothering public safety. If you turn around, they're gone. Call us immediately, because as far as we're concerned, it is an emergency. We need to get there. You're not inconveniencing us. What we don't want is family members going out and just looking for them for hours and hours and hours. And then calling us, because we've lost valuable time. But those areas need to be checked, because they're not in their right mind, so they may easily walk into a serious or dangerous situation not realizing it, and we need to find them.
Mm-hmm. Laura shared in the chat, or the person might be naked with running shoes on, as this was brought up on Nextdoor, which is an app in my neighborhood. They called the guy a pervert, and I let people know it's common for people living with dementia. Yeah, right. I mean, like, he probably was not aware. That probably was not his plan, So that's really interesting about the water thing.
But that also, back to that example, officers, if they don't understand Alzheimer's, they're being dispatched to indecent exposure.
Right.
They get there, they find the individual. Okay, he broke the law. She broke the law. I've got to take them into custody. When in fact, taking them and placing them into a correction facility could cause more problem, could cause more harm for that person. Something needs to be done, but it's not always, was their intent to expose themselves? Well, maybe or maybe not. But arresting them is not always the best course of action, and sometimes it needs to be evaluated. Maybe they need to go to a hospital. Maybe they do have to we need to have a mental health worker come, because many times there are mental health issues with dementia. Mm-hmm. So you may have to get all of your resources in line to help provide the best service for that person. Totally.
And I think that's why it's so important to, be having conversations like this to enlighten, officers. It may not be what it looks like. There really could be a mental health issue involved that is not a dangerous one to anyone else, but only a danger, to their own safety.
Right.
So here are some of the myths, all the things you hear that totally are not true about dementia. Families will often say, oh, she has no idea who I am. My mom has no clue who I am. I find that this is not really accurate. I call this timeline confusion, which we'll get to more in a minute, but more that this person is just on a different timeline and is not recognizing you based on your age. And this is also, as we'll talk about, very important for the officer approaching a person living with dementia, what they look like, what their age is, etc. Also this one, that he's incredibly aggressive. This person may not really be aggressive, but perhaps they are acting differently than they've acted before. And so, a son is calling the police to report his father because he's just at his wit's end. I mean, he doesn't know what else to do, and I say, is he really, or are you doing something to piss him off? Is something you're doing as a family member maybe agitating this person and then causing you to pick up the phone and, call the police? Because now the police are involved and they're coming into a situation like Tim said before, where they're like, oh, well, this person, we have a domestic happening. It's like, no, this person just is trying to, he's trying to go to the grocery store because he thinks he needs to go get something, and his son, of course, doesn't want him to go. She's super racist now, but was never like that before. She was definitely always racist, but her brain had a filter, and it no longer has. And you hear this all the time where someone's like, oh my God, she curses nonstop. She's got such a foul mouth now. She always had a foul mouth in her head. It just wasn't really coming out. And so, without that filter, sometimes families start to panic. They're like, oh my God, this person's totally different than they were before. Maybe personalities do change sometimes, especially if someone has like a frontotemporal issue. But a lot of times that filter is just gone. So I found that people become more of themselves with dementia a lot of times. If I tell him this fact enough times, he'll definitely remember. As we know, no, he will not. A lot of times people rely on this, like, I'm just going to keep repeating something to somebody, but then you get back to, are you just going to upset this person enough that now you're going to have somebody who's really agitated and aggressive, on your hands. And this one, she isn't a wander risk. So a lot of times families, like this person I talked about the other week, she, her, husband probably is like, oh, well, she's fine. I don't think she's going to leave the house. She doesn't know where to go. She doesn't want to go anywhere. It's not that she really wants to go anywhere. She probably wakes up and goes, I forgot to get blah, blah, blah. Or I have to go pick up the kids at the bus stop. And then she's out the door. So just assuming that somebody is not a risk for elopement, as we say, is really just a bet on this person's life that I don't think is worth the bet. It's not, you really don't want to make that call. And a lot of times families will make that call. They'll say, well, I'm not going to bother locking the door or anything. She's not going anywhere. We don't know that. She hasn't before. It doesn't mean she won't now.
And that's an issue that comes up with driving. You hear from, well, they only go up the street to the store, or they only go to these spots, but they don't take into account what happens when they drive and they miss that turn and they keep going, They keep going down the road. And we have had situations where they've been found the next state over, sitting on the side of the road because they forgot you're supposed to put gas in a car. And if they sit there long enough, many times they will get out of the car and just start walking. And, they have no idea where they are. But people who do elope, wander, what we have to keep in mind is that all of us know that they're lost. They are the only ones that have no idea that they are that they're lost. They're not going to ask for help. We've had situations where an officer goes up and says, hey, can I help you? Is everything okay? In their mind, everything is fine. They know where they're going. That place they're going may not exist anymore. They may get to that point and the building or the shopping center where they worked is not there anymore. And what that's going to promote is them continuing to walk, looking for that place, and they're never going to find it. And they just keep walking and walking. And next thing you know, you may find somebody realizes what's going on. They take advantage of them, steal whatever they have, throw them in a ditch. And that's another reason it is an emergency. And we've got to get out there and find them as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I've also heard that people living with dementia will sometimes kind of run from if they feel like they're being chased. Like you said, they don't feel like they're lost. And suddenly people are kind of pursuing them, trying to get them home safely. And they think that they're being followed or chased in some way. They're just not in the same mental state. They're not approaching the situation the way that you are. And I think that's the key here.
And you need to know where if in their years, 20s and 30s, if they spent their days robbing places, assaulting law enforcement, doing things like that, and then all of a sudden we're all out there looking for them, you've got to realize in their mind they may be back there. So when you go to bring them back to safety, they think you're trying to take them into custody. That's why it's, families need to let us know their history and where they may be in their mind, so that we don't do something to trigger them to hurt themselves further or get any of us hurt.
Absolutely. Need to know. This brings us right into this point. Approach from the front, not the side or the back, because hearing loss is associated with dementia. And if you approach someone from the back who can't hear you and like put a hand on them, that's going to freak them out. You know, and for someone like me, I'm definitely, you know, a fight or flight person. I'm definitely a fight person. And I would immediately go into fight mode. You know, somebody lays a hand on me, I don't know who it is. Ooh. And you need to know who this person is. Like Tim was just saying, what's their deal? You have a great story about a naval officer.
Yeah, we had a gentleman who was in the Navy during World War II, and once a month he's in his 80s or so, and then once a month we'd get a call about an older gentleman walking down the road with his Navy uniform on. So he would walk down the road, and if anybody walked up and said, "Hey, sir, can I help you? Where are you headed?" And we're in Virginia, just outside of Richmond. He said, "I'm headed to Norfolk. I got to go overseas." So in his mind, our country was at war with Japan and Germany. So he had to get to Norfolk to get on the ship. And I had a couple officers. I actually had one working with me who had a very thick Russian accent, and I had another one who is of Asian descent. And when we got that call about the individual walking down that road, I had to call those officers and say, "Do not go down there," because if somebody approached him and they were of Asian descent in a uniform, and they wouldn't even necessarily need to be in a uniform, but how would he interpret that if they came up to him? As far as he's concerned, they may be the enemy. He may be on top of them trying to kill them because they are the enemy. So I would make sure that those officers did not respond down there, having that information, having that knowledge about him. And I would usually send one or two of my deputies down there who had been in the Navy. So when they walked up, they knew the situation. They'd come up, "Seaman, where are you headed?" "Sir, I'm headed to Norfolk. I got to go overseas." "Well, I need you to get in my car." And the deputies would take him to a restaurant, sit down with him. We'd buy him dinner, buy him lunch, and we'd try to contact his son and get his son down there to pick him up. But realizing where they are in their mind, I mean, you talk about the racial issue. I had a black family called me because grandma was wandering off, and I went in and I thought about it. I said, "Where is she?" They said, she thinks it's like the mid-60s. And here I come in police uniform. So what is her interpretation of me coming in there? So I had to tread very lightly. And it's very good to understand where these families are, where these individuals are. And I've run across people. I had one lady who was 16, in her mind, she was 16 years old. And she could tell me everything about the basketball game the day before in high school, but she had no idea who the family was in the house with her. And it was her daughter, son-in-law, and grandchild. But I'm in uniform. I'd go out in the backyard with her and shoot baskets, and she could still hit the shots. She had a good jump shot, but in her mind, she was 16 years old. And it's knowing where they are to help you not make a drastic mistake.
Leading beautifully into the next point, who you think you are isn't necessarily who you are to them. So if you're an officer approaching, you think you're there to help, and you know, depending on what you look like, you could be somebody else. I had one resident who I absolutely could not work with. She decided that I was sleeping with her husband. All right, you know, it was just me, only me. There was no one else that she hated. It was just me. And, you know, who knows? I could look like somebody who, you know, 40 years ago did sleep with her husband. I don't know. But when she got agitated, I could not work with her. I mean, she wanted to kill me. And I'm not going to stand there and tell her I didn't sleep with her husband, because that is what you would say, right? You know, like, that woman didn't want to talk to me. So I had to send in somebody else. So you have to be aware, you know, who you think you are, and as helpful as you think you are, you may not be who that person wants to talk to. So understanding somebody's mindset. Imagine leaving for work and getting halfway there, then wondering if you turned off the stove. You have no way to check, but have to work all day worrying that phone call will come telling you that your house is gone. Tim, do you have a point on this? This was yours.
No, I just, when I do my classes, you know, you worry about you talk about the agitation, the irritation, and the sundowning, and how they get aggressive, and their nerves are on end many times. And with that stove, you can always turn around and go back. If you don't, you're going to have that nagging feeling all day, like Rachel was saying. The thing is, we can go back and check that stove, but the person with dementia, there's nothing they can check. There's 24/7. There's this nagging feeling that I'm forgetting something. I can't figure out what it is, and that will wear on you for a while, quite a while, and continually. And then that's many times why it's difficult to interact with them. They get aggressive, they're angry, they're agitated. But we need to understand that that nagging feeling is with them 24/7, and it wears on.
Yeah. Over to timeline confusion. The Notebook is a really bad depiction of dementia. I have a whole YouTube video on this. Timeline confusion is the concept that a person living with dementia is on a different timeline than you are, which is why they may mistake you for someone else. Your age is really the key factor with this timeline confusion, because if someone is looking for a much younger version of you, it's going to be very confusing when adult you walks in the room when they're expecting, 10-year-old you or 16-year-old you, and then 50-year-old you, 60-year-old you walks to the door. Them mistaking you for somebody else, or deciding that they don't really know who you are. It's not that they don't, for families, it's not that they don't know you or love you, it's that they can't place you on a timeline. And this goes back to, who you think you are may not be who you are. So for officers approaching, the age is also key, like who you are, what you look like is at that moment incredibly important and valuable to what we need to know about that person, right? We need to know about who we're approaching before we approach them, because there are a lot of confounding factors going on here. With the guy in the naval, the Navy guy, right? There's a lot going on there. You can't just look at this older adult male in a Navy uniform and understand completely what's going on. You need to know his history. And thankfully, Tim and the other officers there knew this guy and know, how to approach him safely, so that both they and he remain safe. But if you don't have that information about him, what are you going to do, right? You're going into a situation blind like that. Dementia, there's so many confounding factors. It's not, you can't just be like, oh, this person has dementia and leave it at that. There's so much going on there.
And key to that is when you come up, and it's the engagement of that interaction with that person. Law enforcement, as most of us know, there's a lot of ego in that job, and we are called on to deal with everything, expected to know the answer to every question, every law out there. But it's trying to convince these officers and get them to recognize that, I may walk in, I may remind that person of somebody that did something to them. What if you're dealing with a female with dementia who was assaulted by a law enforcement officer? How well do you think that interaction is going to go? Or maybe I remind them of somebody from their past. And it's being able to humble yourself to go, I'm really not getting anywhere. Let me back off. Hey, can you come over here and try to talk to them? We're not all good at the same thing. We all have our specialties, but just because I wear that uniform and I have that badge does not mean I'm good at everything. I need to step back sometimes and let somebody else come in and help calm the situation where all I'm going to do is infuriate.
Right. Probably most of you are very familiar with my work in embracing someone's reality, which means when we talk to somebody living with dementia, we're recognizing their reality has shifted. It's no longer what we anticipate as our truth. And, for someone living with dementia, especially someone who's maybe scared, or, they're lost, they're not sure what's going on, what's true for them is not necessarily what's true for us. And a lot of times people make the mistake of trying to use logic to convince somebody living with dementia of something, so trying to, pick up like this lady who got lost down the street a few weeks ago. if you're to approach her and try to explain to her, oh, well, you're confused, you wandered out of your house is down there. Oh, like, you shouldn't be wearing this kind of clothing. It's too hot. Like, let's not get into all that. We're not trying to force somebody to understand things they're not going to understand, but instead finding a way to meet them in their reality. And again, going back to this naval officer, he wants to go to Norfolk, and get to work. Okay, great. Well, let's take a pause and have lunch, and sit down and talk with him. And in that conversation, not trying to convince him that he's not going to Norfolk, but instead to let him share his stories, and just communicate with him. I think the key is communication, not talk. With dementia, you don't want to just talk. You really need to communicate, and a lot of communication is listening and hearing where someone's reality lives so that you can live there as well. So some more de-escalation techniques. A lot of family members don't get it, and that is when the police get called in, right? Families sometimes 1-302, aka send a person to psych against their own judgment when they become aggressive, and then it falls to police and EMTs to make hard choices, which is really challenging. And also, I think people's definition of aggressive is very different. There are some situations where people are incredibly aggressive and the police do need to be involved because it's not physically safe for the family to be there. I'd say the majority of the time, people's definition of aggressive when it comes to dementia is probably not truly aggressive, but it does happen. So I do tell families, especially like if a woman is taking care of her husband who has dementia and he is very physical and he is getting aggressive, I will tell her, like, that may not be a safe situation for you to be caring for him if he gets very angry, and if he throws things, if he tries to hit you, if he hits other stuff in the house, like that may not be a situation that is safe for you to continue caring for him.
And there's also with that aspect is, the mentality of a lot of people and having to deal with the same question over and over and over. And some people are not stable to begin with, but having to care for somebody, sometimes they get frustrated. The caregivers get frustrated and they will lash out at the person with dementia. And what better victim than somebody that can't remember? But you've also got caregivers who are being abused by the person with dementia.
Yep.
And they're allowing it to go on because in their mind, they are the best caregiver for that person, and nobody can do it as well as they can. So you could have it either way, where the individual is being abused and we get called for that and we have to go in there and investigate it. But their caregiver could also be getting abused. We had, it's probably 3 or 4 years ago, had a call in an over 60 community where we got a call that the wife had been stabbed by the husband. And when my officers got there, she was laying in the front yard, cut up. She'd been stabbed, and all of a sudden this husband comes to the door. My officers are trying to tend to her. The husband comes to the door, yells at the officers, says, "Have any of y'all seen my wife? I know she was around here earlier, but I don't know where she is now." He didn't even have any recollection of stabbing her. And like I alluded to earlier, is it necessarily the safest place to take him to jail?
Right.
Was there intent? Did he know that was his spouse? He actually thought she was a stranger in the house because he didn't recognize her. And we ended up getting him to the hospital. But that's where law enforcement, public safety, we are getting drawn into this area, and we've got to know this information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mentioned many times, mental health workers will say dementia isn't a mental health disorder, so they don't want to get involved. That's tough, right? I mean, like, I think it becomes like this gray area of like, what do you do, right? Like, yeah, do you send them to jail? Like, do you arrest them? No. And a lot of times I've seen it where someone will get sent to psych to be evaluated, and then psych doesn't really seem to know what to do with them either, depending on the hospital. And then they'll just kind of like, check them out and go, and send them back out home or wherever, whatever community they came from. And it's just this really tough gray area of like, what do you do? Who helps? There's not like a designated person or, you know, job that necessarily helps with this. So on here we mentioned, you know, your energy as an officer, as someone in public safety, as an EMT is incredibly important. Calm breeds calm, aggression and panic breed aggression, panic. I always, you know, advise like, you know, remove the family from the area, especially if you have like a family member who was the one who called the police and they're really agitated. You know, they're going to make your job a lot harder. Never restrain an older adult in the same way you'd restrain an aggressive younger person. Older adults are not built the same way. They are, you know, not as flexible and will not recover as quickly from some sort of aggressive physical hold. Can you communicate? Can you communicate in their world in order to calm them down? And can you communicate to family in a way that they understand? Because a lot of times, right, the family who's calling, they're not always sure what to do. And they go, well, what do we do? And when people go, what do we do? A lot of times the list of things to do is one of them is like, call the police. It's like, what do we do? I don't know, call the police. Right? What do we do? Who do we call? I don't know. Cops, I guess. Yeah, let's do that. And I advise this, especially for EMTs, to check for do not resuscitate orders. CPR in older adults can be bad. It can cause suffering and fatality just suddenly. Like a lot of times when you're getting a new resident into a dementia care community, we do push the families. In some communities, I think skilled nursing makes them sign something for a do not resuscitate, because CPR in older adults is just, could be really rough, because you know, you can break some ribs pretty easily. And for a younger person, you could, you know, you could recover from that. But
well, the key is everybody asks, why did they call 911? Why did they call 911? And the single answer to that is, we show up.
yeah.
That's why.
Yeah. Tim said, Laura says, Tim, you mentioned that one police officer may be more approachable than a different police officer. So when you train police officers, do you recommend a few of them go investigate the dementia situation versus just one officer going by themselves?
Well, most calls we go on that's dealing with interacting with somebody, especially dementia, I recommend at least two officers. We don't want all the officers going and showing up, making it look like a huge crime scene. Yeah, you might find one officer stronger in this area, or being able to interact better with them. And if we've had previous instances of dealing with those individuals, then we can put information in our CAD system, a computer system. That's why, even if they don't wander, even if they don't elope, being able to disclose information to your police department, sheriff's office, so they can have it in the computer system for fire, EMS, or rescue. So when and if a call comes out there, you can say, as you're responding, try not to use your lights, try not to use your siren. This person believes they are back in this time or that time. But that information can be relayed to those emergency personnel, and it's great information to have when you're responding, so you can plan how you approach. So I would encourage people. I know it's a very private issue dealing with dementia, and all, and families want to handle it themselves. And many times when they bring up dementia, that friend network that they had starts to disappear, and they're not there anymore. But we need somebody to disclose that information, so that when we get there, you know, our job is to come out there and do our jobs effectively. And the better and the more information we have, the more effectively we can do our jobs. So it's disclosing that information is imperative, but also for officers to understand what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. Hey, this is probably not a situation I'm going to get anywhere with. Why don't you try it? It's being able to humble yourself to that point.
Yeah. So what can we do differently? I found this article on mental health that was pretty cool. There's a program in Dallas that sends a social worker on 911 calls about mental health. It says previously, this is an excerpt, previously the police would respond to all 911 calls, often to the detriment of those reaching out with mental health emergencies. When a police officer is on the scene, he's trained to do two things, Wagner says: make an arrest or take somebody to the hospital. And he's an officer. That meant that chronically mentally ill people were just going to jail or to the ER, to the point where hospitals were over capacity and didn't have enough resources to care for them. And repeat calls for the same person were endemic. The quick fix wasn't helping these people in the long term. And I think, like, you really did speak to that, right? You're trained to do, as an officer, okay, make an arrest or take somebody to the hospital. And unfortunately, there's not a lot else to do. And in the case of like this lady wandering, the officer brought her back to her house and dropped her off. And I said to my mom, that's not the last time you're going to see that lady walking down the street. So, and I was like, somebody needs to call, somebody needs to call Adult Protective Services, because clearly this guy is not keeping his wife totally safe, that she's able to get on all of these like winter clothes, but not put on shoes and head out the door. And that's not the last time you're going to see that lady. So yeah, it's a problem. And I really like this idea and was like, wow, I wish there was more of this, being able to send somebody out who can assist the officers and potentially take over, the case at some point. So police can actually do what, what they're there to do, and aren't having to deal with all these dementia and mental health calls. So that would be great if more places did this.
COVID has not helped anything as far as
COVID has not helped anything.
We are being inundated with people. In Virginia, it's an ECO, emergency custody order, where if we feel like somebody is a danger to themselves, we can take them into custody, take them to a medical facility to be medically cleared, and then a mental health worker evaluates them. And I can tell you, as of last week, every bed in any institution in the state was occupied. And we had 4 at the hospital in my county just waiting because they could not find a bed anywhere for them to go. But our job in law enforcement over the years, I've been doing this 31 years. Our job is not, it used to be go out there, arrest bad guys and enforce traffic. These days we are social workers, we are problem solvers, and anybody has a problem about anything. We've had calls for a gentleman bought a set of windshield wipers at Walmart, didn't know how to put them on. So what does he do? He calls 911 because he knows we'll show up. Mm. He's expecting us to put the windshield wipers on his car. So we get pulled into everything. But in Virginia, law enforcement, public safety, we are actually mandatory reporters. If we run across somebody who is in need of services, many officers don't realize it, but we are obligated to notify Adult Protective Services, give them the information. We document it on a report to show that we did it. So yeah, we are supposed to be directing them to down the avenues to be able to get that help. So that's another thing I push these officers: don't just go and talk to them and leave. If they need to be, if they need help or they are in need of services, you need to direct them in the right direction to make sure they get those services. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Laura had said, sometimes the caregiving spouse doesn't want to disclose this information. Can a daughter who lives in a different state call your police department to share the information confidentially?
Well, yeah, it's not protected. HIPAA pertains to medical settings. I would not hesitate if I was in another state. I would encourage anybody in another state, if you know there's going to be an issue or potential problem with your parents, family member, call and give them that information just to put it in a computer system, because what you don't want to do is look back later, have an unfortunate situation happen and go, man, I wish I had told them. I wish I would have disclosed that information to them. I don't see any problem there.
Cool. Tim, this is your slide. We got to it. There we go.
Yes. It's not acting properly, but when I do face-to-face, I kind of show that it's supposed to be the person in the middle who has the dementia, and all these other people and everybody in their lives start to disappear. The slide's not working properly, but what happens is that person with dementia pretty much starts forgetting who all those people around them are. They don't understand their son. They don't understand who the son, daughter is, their family member. I had one girl who called me one time. I went and met her and her mom. talked to them for a while. Mom seemed pretty good. She had Alzheimer's at the time, but she seemed to be in pretty good shape. And about 8 months later, Amy called me and said, "Hey, my mom keeps calling me sissy, and I don't understand what." I said, "Well, she's lost that much of her memory to where she thinks you're her sister."
Timeline confusion. Yes.
And then 8 months later, she called and said, "Tim, my mom keeps calling me mom." And I said, "Amy, I'm sorry, but your mom thinks you are her mom." And that's heartbreaking. But they're not doing it on purpose. They're not asking the same question 25, 50, 100 times a day. They're not doing it on purpose. And what I love about my position and my training of the officers, we can go out and educate these caregivers, and the education they're giving the caregivers is more than many times they're getting from the doctors. Not everybody has a Rachael to help share this information and tell them what they're living. But they're so secluded. The doctors many times are saying, "We believe it's dementia, whatever, see you later, bye, bring me another copay." And I think we owe it to the families, we owe it to the caregivers, we owe it to the individual suffering to get out there and educate them and let them know what they're living. Mm-hmm. So, and that's, I love doing it. I'm thrilled to death Rachael pulled me into this. I think we've got some great information to give out.
Yeah. So I'm going to open it up a little bit here since we're done with our presentation for questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, stories, yada, yada. If anybody has anything to share.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. It usually takes a minute. Take a picture of our nice little webinar here. Cool.
Hey, Rachel.
Yeah.
This is Sarah.
Hi.
Hey. Hi, Tim.
Hello.
Hey, I am well known in my area that I do a lot of dementia education. Mm-hmm. And I was asked by our local police department to come in, either make a video or come in and train the officers. I don't know enough about police work to be able to do that, but we're working on getting them the fire and first responders certified course for them to be able to do that. But my question is, how do we go about getting those police officers CEUs and the training that they need to be able to do their best work?
Tim, you might be able to speak to the CEU part. Can you
yeah, I know Virginia law enforcement get their in-service credits through my classes, and as well as public safety, fire and EMS, they actually get CEUs in Virginia. And I went to I had worked with the state fire marshal's office, and they're the ones that certified that to happen. I've actually trained all of our county's fire marshals. I've developed a curriculum for the Fire Marshals Academy here in Virginia, so they do go through some training as well. But it's through the fire marshals, the state fire marshal's office, or Virginia, as far as law enforcement, is Department of Criminal Justice. It's getting them to recognize the training as worthy of obtaining those credits. But that's who I would get with the state Department of Criminal Justice for that state, or state fire marshals, fire and EMS marshal. Make them aware of it. It is available. I am available to do the training. And if they see my training as suitable to give CEUs, then hey, we'll get it done.
Cool. Yeah, I've generally found that with any CEUs for anything, most states are more concerned with the hours than the content, which is kind of a problem. Yes. But it's very true. People ask me all the time, like, I have this whole dementia program where people can like pay to be in my course, and people ask me, well, is this state approved? And I'm like, believe it or not, there is no governing body for dementia education in this country. There is no governing body for dementia education. There's like something called the National Council of Certified Dementia Practitioners. That's just a good name. Like, they're not like, it's just a good name. She did a good job naming that group. But there's no governing body that is like, this is the education you need, which is nuts, but it's true. And so as long as you're getting a certain amount of hours, most states are cool with it. Some states, pretty much every state website I've ever been on is a hot mess. Especially the Pennsylvania state website. I'm like, if I'm getting lost on a website, it's a bad website, okay? Like, I'm telling you, the Pennsylvania state website is not good. And a lot of them will make you like submit information to like get a CEU approval. Yowza. You can submit information, you pay like $40 and you will be waiting months to hear back. And they'll always approve it, but it's just like, it's more, honestly, it's more about the hours. So it depends on, the profession, but generally especially if you have some sort of distinction to teach the class, they're usually cool with it. So because I have a master's, I can teach stuff that, if you're a police officer and they want, certain police information, like you can do it. If you're a nurse and you're speaking to nurses, usually the state wants some sort of designation and they're worried about the hours and your title.
Yeah, and if you check, you can check my website, and I have traveled around the country for the International Association of Chiefs of Police, all the way to San Diego, and they have deemed me a subject matter expert on Alzheimer's dementia as it relates to law enforcement. So if there's any questions, I have been deemed a subject matter expert. The state has deemed me a subject matter expert. Who that person was, I don't know, but they do claim as me being a subject matter expert in this field.
I just posted my website link in there. And yeah, Tim, what is your website?
It is and don't forget the hyphen, betterunderstanding.com. Or you can just Google my name and Alzheimer's or autism. I teach that as well. And all my contact information is on there.
I also put my freebies in there. I have 2 free downloads from my website and my products page. And then there's Tim's betterunderstanding.com. I'm going to put his name also in there in case you missed that. Same thing with me. You can always Google me, and
She's all over.
I'm all over. I spent years cultivating my Google presence. So like you can't find me, there's a problem. Yeah. Anybody else got anything? I appreciate everybody, especially people sticking around too. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's always cool when people stick around throughout the whole thing.
Oh yeah.
I had to turn my stand back on.
I think I was on mute before, but I just want to say thank you to both of you for doing this. It's really appreciated. And
Of course.
I think you can help a lot of people because it can kind of branch out. And
Right.
thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to save the webinar and I'll post it probably on my YouTube or somewhere. Lorna says, thank you both. Not only good information, but reinforce what I've already done. Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll try to, share this around too.
I had a quick question before we close.
Yes.
So, Tim, I was curious if you know about the Dementia Friendly America initiative, where there's quite a few states that are signing up. I'm in Virginia as well,
Okay.
but I'm in the Herndon area, Dementia
Right.
Friendly, and we're actually trying to work with police departments. So I know this is more of like a grassroots effort, and it
Right.
really depends on each one, but I know that we've been trying to work with police officers. And so I'm curious if you've sort of joined forces with maybe a Dementia Friendly America, in the Richmond area. I'm not sure if there is one yet, but I know a lot of people are signing up their states.
I'm not familiar with them.
Okay. Well, if I can email you, I'd love to send you some
Yes,
information.
please do. Please do. Like I said, I've got 31 years doing police work. Not that I'm done, but I'm done. If I could just get out there and educate people and do that and not have to put that uniform on anymore, I'd be thrilled to death.
Awesome. I'll send you that information because I really feel like there's potential for you all to join forces and just be even stronger. So.
What I found with the stuff that I teach, I've gone all over the place, and it's interesting because I always start the class, how many of you wanted to be here, especially law enforcement, because we're a very difficult crowd. And law enforcement, if you don't have that history of or experience as a law enforcement officer, you have no idea with police, and you get up in front of a bunch of officers, many of them just shut down.
Exactly.
And I always like to bring, have somebody like Rachael, or if I'm teaching about kids with autism, intellectual disabilities, having them parent, because I feel like we supplement each other. But I always ask them how many of y'all wanted to be here or how many were voluntold. Most of them, I said,
Voluntold.
how many of y'all looking forward to this? And nobody is. But by the time I get done with the class, they realize they've dealt with it so much and now they understand what it is. And I've got people with 30 years coming up to me saying, this is the best class I've ever had. I had no idea. And it's not me, it's just the information and being able to relay it. And I love seeing that light bulb come on and they get it. But again, if you take somebody that hadn't been a police officer, doesn't understand it, many times that police officer audience, they just shut down because you don't know my job. You don't know what I see on a daily basis. And it's just the nature of the profession. And I've trained the firemen, the fire marshals and all, and I've told them before, if you want to train fire and EMS, hey, you may want your people to train fire and EMS. You may not want me coming in, but if you need me, let me know.
Absolutely.
Be glad to help out any way possible.
Thank you.
Sure.
Cool. Well, everybody, thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you.
I will post the replay somewhere. I think I'll probably post it on my YouTube. I think it'll get more views that way. Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you all very much.
Talk to you later.
Y'all take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.